So today we are looking at some post by some random guy on this website, I don't know, Hypixel. I was just Google searching just any type of discussion websites related to Gen 8 random battles. So this was just one of the ones like, top 10, 20 Google searches. If you just Google like how to get better at random battles Gen 8. So I don't even know what this website is. It looks like it was posted by Snake on September 15, 2022, so pretty recent. Back when that might have been before Gen 9 Ranbats was even a thing, maybe towards the end of Gen 8 Ranbats. Um, so random battles, ah, how I hate you so, is what his first sentence is, and the title that he came up with is Random Battles, the Worst Metagame in Pokemon. And so I very much disagree with what he says, although I think by the end of his argument, it's pretty clear that he's mainly just saying he wants complete and utter randomness, complete chaos, essentially, when it comes to random battles. But ultimately, like, we already have that format, so there's really no reason to have random battles that way because we already have Hackmon's Cup. Just go play Hackmon's Cup or go play Challenge Cup or just play just regular, like, build your own team, right? Because you can make any type of random team you want and play, and opponents are basically free to make any types of teams. So if you have your friend, you can basically play him and make whatever type of random team, however random you want to make your teams, you can do it. So there's really no basis behind his argument here, but it's still a very interesting, just all the points that he brings up, because it'll make a pretty good discussion video in general, because he does bring up a lot of very interesting facts and useful knowledge that are good to know anyway, so that's why I'm making this video. And it's also maybe just to, I guess, offer advice to anyone who might share this person's type of opinion, because even in the comments section after his post, like, there are some like counter arguments that are really good to what he says. But I guess part of my argument is that part of why I'm making this video, I guess, is just to say that we should for sure keep random battles like as a format that exists on Pokemon Showdown. Um, yeah, like, I guess the main thing is I don't want, discussions like this, like, like somehow making it so random battles won't exist in the future. If there's like so much negative stuff, so many negative comments and commentary hurled at random battles. I don't think that's the case, and I think random battles, from what I read, like on one other random post, was maybe the most popular thing on Pokemon Showdown, which is another reason why probably random battles will be sticking around for good, for as long as Pokemon Showdown exists, I would assume and I would hope, because I really do enjoy. In fact, the only thing I do play on Pokemon Showdown is the Gen 8 random battles these days. So I definitely enjoy this format, and I think most people do. I think that's the main reason. It's actually the main format that people play when they do play on Pokemon Showdown. So I hope they don't get rid of it. They even apparently host like some tournament, some like huge tournament, like an international tournament, just on random battles, which is another reason why I hope they never get rid of random battles, or I think that's in the favor that they'll keep it. So continuing, we'll just read through. It's not a very long post, so we can get through it, but it's very interesting. So, random battles, how I hate you so. If you don't already know, on a cool little website called Pokemon Showdown, you can choose to battle in over 100 formats. Is it that many? I mean, it's probably about 100, probably not much more. 100 formats of Pokemon battles, and it just turns out that random battles are the most popular. Yeah, maybe that's where I read it from. LOL. Random battles, or what I will call it from now on, randbats, is one of the worst formats. I think it's probably the best format, in fact, or one of the best. I mean, and in fact, I think his whole argument is that it should be different. In which case, there are many good arguments that give him exactly what he would want without affecting random battles. So one of those would be just leave random battles completely alone and just make because he even said there's 100 formats. So just make another format. They could just make 101 formats. One more that's just exactly what this guy is wanting to have. Although they sort of already have that in Hackmon's Cup. The only thing with Hackmon's Cup is I think maybe it's just based on whatever the current gen is. So maybe it's only for Gen 9. So they could just make a Hackmon's Cup for every gen. I mean, I wouldn't be opposed to that at all. You probably don't want like 1,000 different formats, because then I feel like we don't really want too many more formats on the website, mainly because they may start deleting some formats just because I guess maybe if it costs money to have so many formats like on one website. I don't know exactly what the ad revenue would be for Pokemon Showdown. And also, you would just have fewer players playing any given format. If there were more formats to be added, like if there were 1,000 formats, then you would only have maybe like rough numbers, maybe like a few hundred people like playing. Like if 1,000 people are playing, let's just say like on average, like 1,000 people right now are playing random battles. But if you keep adding more formats, then it's gonna reduce the number just statistically. Only like maybe you could imagine maybe only 200 people will be playing random battles if you introduce too many more formats. And then at that point, it's going to take like way too long to grab any game because there aren't going to be many people playing, and then there are going to be very few people who are actually good at any format. Um, so it's just going to be really awful if you think about it if they keep adding more formats. I think arguably, we already have too many formats. But I think it's not terrible at this moment because like I'm at the top of the ladder on Gen 8, but it still isn't like terribly long to get a game unless if I'm playing at like midnight, in which case it's like maybe like 5 minutes max if I'm playing when like no one is on and trying to load up a game if I'm like rank 1 on the ladder or whatever. But if I'm just playing like at a normal time during the day, it's probably like only 2 or 3 minutes, like not even that. It's probably like 1.5 minutes or so on average that I would have to wait for a game. Um, so it's really not bad at this point, but you don't want it to get worse. So I think maybe we could add a few more formats in, but only very, very sparingly. Like maybe at most you would only want maybe 1 or 2 dozen more formats than currently already exist. Like at most, absolutely at most. Um, so then continuing, he's saying, yeah, random battles, one of the worst formats. To bring up why, you need to understand the core rules of rand bats. First, there are a bunch of clauses, quote, rules, in effect. So one lucky spore, a 100% sleep move, doesn't sweep your whole team. Yeah, and I agree. I like the clauses. Just off the top of my head, I think I agree with all of the clauses that are currently implemented in Gen 8 random battles. If I thought really hard, maybe I could tweak some small things. But I mean, I'd say it's extremely fair format that rewards the better. Like if you're more skilled, you can actually get good. It isn't just like a coin flip, right? It's actually more like chess than checkers. Um, so just currently, I think I agree with keeping Gen 8 random battles exactly how it is and not really changing anything unless if you really think it over like super carefully, maybe only very minor tweaks here and there, maybe just to mon like move sets as maybe the main thing, but I think Just off the top of my head, I would not change anything at all with Gen 8 random battles. I think they've tweaked it a lot in the past, in fact, and to get it to this point, like they had to keep improving and improving and improving it over a long period of time to get it to where it is today. So, if it was only like 50% good when they started, and then they keep tweaking it, they got it to 75, they got it to 90, and now it's like 95% perfect. So why change it at this point? You'll probably just make it worse. And then the next thing he says is he looks like he talks about the different clauses. So the sleep clause, you can't have more than one poke or one Pokemon asleep in battle on the other team. Well, on both teams. Yeah, so that's true. That's like the Spore example he gave. That's a pretty excellent clause, in my opinion. And then, because obviously, I mean, he even says it, so you don't want Spore to just like because it's a 100% accurate sleep move, and then like sleep is kind of broken because you can easily get the 2 or 3 turn sleep, or you could just like put something to sleep and then put another mon to sleep, and then you could just like pivot into just like cloister shell smash or whatever setup you want to do while your opponent can't do anything, because your opponent can't even like switch out unless they want to make a very crazy prediction, because you could just predict them and just keep clicking like sleep powder or spore, and then before your opponent knows it, their entire team is asleep, because they're trying to like pivot into another mon, so you don't go into your setup sweeper, but you can easily just predict that and just click double spore or double sleep powder. It would be especially broken if a mon had like sub spore or sub sleep powder, because then you're just never going to be waking up. In fact, that's kind of what Executor is like and what Venusaur is like. Yeah, and yeah, that would just be completely busted. So it's a really good thing that they have a sleep clause, because I remember almost like whenever I get sleep, I'm always thinking of how broken it is. Like whenever I'm just playing games, I'd be like, yeah, if I could just put one more mon to sleep, I'd probably just automatically win the game. Um, I just remember that going through my head like most of the time that I get a mon with like sleep powder or spore. Um, in fact, like I even remember like Pokeaim MD, like when he was doing Ranbats Gen 8, he was saying like, I don't believe in blind sporing or blind sleep powdering. In my opinion, I do believe in it a lot because, well, for multiple reasons, I don't have to like get into it, but I think he would like 100% change his opinion on that if there was no sleep clause, because then there's like no downside almost to just blind sporing or just blind sleep powdering, but then it's not really as skillful of a game at that point, because you can just blindly click the sleep move, which if your opponent doesn't have like a very very specific mon like a grass type, and they only have 6 mons and it's randomized, and there are 17 types in the game, so it's unlikely they have that. And also it might be unlikely, perhaps they just don't even want to reveal it for other reasons, right? Even if they do have a mon, they could switch in like a magic bounce mon or a grass type, or what else doesn't really get hit by sleep, their electric surge mon or whatever. Maybe they just don't want to reveal that. Like you don't want to be just switching in a Tapu Koko just so you don't potentially get put to sleep, because your opponent might potentially just go for a sleep powder. Um, because you don't want to reveal like a super fast, super strong offensive threat like that, just because you're threatened by a potential sleep move. Um, so that's, I think, an excellent clause to have would be this sleep clause. Um, so I definitely agree with that. I think I had another point that I was thinking of. Um, so related, pertaining to sleep. Yeah, again, it's like just a skillless play essentially, and it's just like broken if you can just keep clicking the sleep move. So that's kind of like another. That's actually a very similar thing that It's actually another clause technically, although it's more of a hidden clause rather than a clause that's announced at the beginning of the game. So like a new player, when you're loading up a game, a new player will see these clauses, I'm pretty sure. Like at the top sentence of like turn 1 or turn 0, whatever the turn is that starts the game, like it'll announce like sleep clause, species clause, and whatever other clause there is. But the other clause that's hidden is like the Dynamax flying clause, and that I'm quite certain the random like auto generator. I tried to say two words at the same time. The auto generation for random Pokemon will make it so that you can only get two Mons at most that have max airstream. So that would be like a hidden clause um, that's implemented that you don't see, that a more advanced player would be aware of. So it's kind of funny. So that's like one of the hidden clauses that this guy apparently, I'm assuming, isn't even aware of. Just because I read later on that he's saying he's like, I don't know, 1300 or whatever GXE. So I'm assuming that means, maybe he's not as aware. It's just funny to me because, he'd be even more pissed off. He'd be more fuming about the whole Ranbat situation if I told him that it was actually like an even better designed game and an even more well built game, an even better game to play. He'd be just even more pissed off by that if I just laid out more of the facts. Because yeah, like I said, like they kept improving and improving random battles to get it to where it's at today, which is why it's so excellent to play. And basically why I'm trying to take a dump on this guy's argument. Although at the same time, I mean, well, yeah, mm, I kind of get what he's saying a bit. I guess the one thing is, I really don't know what this guy is looking for. Like, we already have Hackmon's Cup, and that's exactly what he's like proclaiming he wants. Essentially, like he's like way down here in the comment section. I know I'm skipping ahead, but he just has a comment somewhere where he says exactly, like, I'm not putting words in his mouth. Like he's saying, I want full randomness. Like, I want full randomness, then just go play Challenge Cup or go play Hackmon's Cup. I guess the only thing is maybe they need like a Gen 8. They need to keep the Gen 8 Hackmon's Cup around or the Gen 8 Challenge Cup around. But then again, I kind of appreciate that they don't do that because, like I was saying, then that would lure away more players from. Like, they need to keep the formats low. Like, we can't. Like, we might even have too many formats. It's going to be way too long to play any skillful opponent. It's going to be way too long of a wait time in between games to, be able to play even a game. Like, not even against like another skilled opponent. Like, not even if you're that high on the ladder. Um, so unfortunately for this guy, I think it's just everything is okay as is. I think honestly Pokemon Showdown is like really good as is. The only thing is maybe we need to stay around, the current number of formats that we currently have. In fact, I would argue like if we get a lot more users, like I don't know, let's just say there are on average 10,000 users, 10,000 different people who play Pokemon Showdown a day. Like let's just say if in the future that number goes up by a few thousand, then maybe we can add like one or two more formats. Maybe for every extra 1,000 new users that we have on average, maybe we can add like one more format. But I would also say that if we're losing maybe a few hundred users, like if we lose say 500 users, like on average, if 500 less users are playing on Pokemon Showdown per day, like playing anything at all in Pokemon Showdown per day, then you need to reduce the number of format maybe by one or two. Um, yeah, like if it goes from like say just for example 10,000 users per day to like 5,000 users per day in the future, then you would have to reduce the number of formats probably by half. something drastic like that, just so there isn't a super long wait time in between games. Um, so so that's sort of what I'm saying now, is that we might even already have too many formats. But anyway, I digress. Um, let's see, where was he at now? So he talks about sleep clause, and then he talks about species clause. You can only have one of the same Pokemon on your team. No dupes or no duplicates. So, yeah, that is definitely another thing. I think even you can't even have two Aegislashes, even though I think there's technically an Aegislash and an Aegislash Blade as two separate entities in the coding. I guess it sort of counts as one, just because I mean I played like probably tens of thousands of Gen 8 games, and I don't know if I played that many, but probably close to that, probably at least like 20,000 games or whatever. But I don't ever remember like two Aegis slashes, or I'm trying to remember, is there like any other weird type of Mon that could potentially have some sort of duplicate? No, like you can't even have like, I've never even seen like Gmax versus regular form, like for Inteleon or Copperajah. So it basically counts as like the same Pokemon essentially. I guess that kind of makes sense too, because then you would like automatically know their set. Like if they have one Copperajah Gmax and then they send out another Copperajah later, then you would know automatically that it's not the Gmax one. You would know that the first one would have to be whatever it is, like the Gmax, and then the second one would have to be the other variant. That's the non-Gmax version. But at that point, then that's just giving you like too much information essentially. So that's sort of like that's I guess a reason why that isn't the case, right? Because then you would just automatically know that their entire set, or you would know their form. You'd basically be given like free information at that point, which I guess is a bit of a unfair advantage for you, and of course a disadvantage for them. Um, I mean, it isn't really that. I mean, I feel like that it probably doesn't like matter like if that were the case or not. Like it probably wouldn't affect too many games and the outcomes of too many games in general. I think like all of the other stuff like affects the metagame a lot more than what I just talked about. You know, like sleep clause and like the airstream clause, because Dyna airstream is just too broken. Or the other clause would be like the species clause, like you can only have two of the same type on your team, which I think is a good clause because it prevents you from just getting destroyed by your opponent. Because again, I mean, I said this like in a previous video, like they could just have Jinx, and then you have three. If you have like all grass type, or if you have like three grass types and like three whatever, like three dragon types, then they all just die to ice, right? So that's why it's good to have only up to two Mons of the same type on the team, which is the current like hidden clause that is implemented in team generation. So again, just keep Gen 8 random battles exactly how it is. Don't change anything unless if it's extremely minor tweaks that you very carefully thought of, that will make improvements on a very minor scale, because again we're like 95% perfect, we're like 99% perfect from all of the trial and error testing that they went through already to design and to make Gen 8 random battles what it is today. So then he talks about yeah, again, the species clause. I mean, yeah, it's whatever. I don't know how much like I really care about. I don't think it like you can only have one of the same Pokemon on your team. No duplicates. I mean, honestly, I don't think it would really like affect the metagame that much. Either way, like I think like the best players like it wouldn't affect how many times you win or lose like statistically on average over hundreds of games. I don't really think. I think and it doesn't really, honestly, I don't know like how much I really even care about species clause, but yeah, just be aware that it is a thing. Um, and then the last is HP percentage clause. Just shows your HP in percentages. And I do think this is a good thing because it just helps the more skillful player to win because you don't have to just randomly guess, how much, your move did because it's not like the Pokemon games, right? Right? Like in the Pokemon games, you just see like their health bar and you just see it's like green, orange, or red. So it doesn't tell you how much your moves do. So basically, at that point, like damage calc isn't going to really help you nearly as much. So it's going to be difficult to make the skillful and correct plays because you won't know how much your move did and you won't know how much HP they have remaining and all this. So I really do think that they need to keep this. I really do strongly agree with keeping the HP percentage clause as a thing. Besides, like if they took it away, then people would just have to then what people what people would actually do, and I've seen this before, is people would actually just make a code, a program, a computer program that just tells you how much damage your move did because it would basically just look at the health bar, and then it would just count the pixels in the health bar, and then it would be able to calculate exactly how much your move did. Right, like if it looks like your move did just by eye, if your move did like 20 to 25% or whatever, like probably that's the as accurate as you can get just by like looking at it like with your physical eyeball. But then you just have the computer program like look at the length, like it just says okay, there's 100 pixels in this pixel bar, so that move did 22 pixels, so it did exactly 22% HP to that mon. So then the computer program will just be able to instantly tell you that. So there really is no reason in getting rid of the HP percentage clause because I mean, in a way, I guess like the more skillful player will actually be even better because the more skilled player will actually just write a computer program that just tells them the HP percentage. So yeah, I mean, it doesn't really matter either way. I mean, it's just like it would just be more of a pain if they got rid of the HP percentage clause, because then I would just have to write my own computer code to tell me that. Um, So then the next thing would be species clause is extremely important to the metagame, so that you don't just get 30 ELO and climb to the top of the ladder because you just so happened to get 6 Zations. I mean, I don't know how much I agree with that or really care about this statement that he's making. Because I mean, like I said already, like I don't really care too much about species clause. I mean, on average, it's not going to matter anyway. I mean, there's two ways to look at it, like on average versus, against hundreds of opponents or just like against single opponents. So you could get the macro or the micro view on this phenomenon. So I think on the view of playing hundreds of games, just how good it or bad is it for the metagame in general? So I could think about that first, and then think about what about just like if you're in a tournament setting, I guess, and then you just happen to get like two really good mons or two really bad mons against your opponent. I don't know. I think it's kind of really complicated because like you could get two mons that just happen to be really good against your opponent or two mons that are just average or two of the same mon, I mean, you know, two mons that are the same mon that are just like really bad against your opponent, you know? So I don't really know exactly where to go from there. I mean, I guess if you get two or three like of the same mon that are really good against your opponent, and then they even get like two mons that are just like really bad against you, then I mean, I guess it's just even way more unbalanced of a game at that point. I guess like on average, if you're playing like hundreds of games or whatever, I don't know how much of a difference it would make in terms of how many games you win or lose. Because on average, half of the games you're going to get a better team than your opponent. Half of the time you're going to get worse teams than your opponent. You know, that's exactly what the math is over hundreds of games. So I don't know about species clause. I don't know. I'd have to like really, really think about that. I'd probably have to think of every single mon in the game and compare them against each other, or do something really complicated like that. Because of course there are like hundreds of mons in the metagame. So I don't know how much I care or don't care about species clause at this point. But he's saying, so it's a good clause so that you don't get 30 ELO and climb to the top of the ladder. LOL, like what's he talking about? Like the top of the ladder is like super high. It's like 2500 and you start at 1000. If you win a game, you get like plus 20, plus 30 points. So it's going to take you like a full, like if you're winning every single game, it's going to take you like a full day to get to the top of the ladder. And excuse me, I'm talking about when he posted this. So that was back when the top players were like 2500 ELO. So these days it's like maybe 17 to 1800 ELO is basically the top of the ladder. So it wouldn't take you a full day to, like, say you're like the best player, it wouldn't take you a full day to reach that these days. It would probably take like half a day. Yeah, maybe just like half a day to reach, like if you're starting from scratch, like the bottom, the very lowest rank on the ladder, it'd probably take me like half a day to get to rank 1 on the ladder, of constant playing. Maybe slightly over half a day, probably not a full day though. um, because usually like when I'm looking at my win loss record, it's something like until I get like to the very top, like the top of the ladder is say 1750, 1750 ELO. like I can basically get, like, the games don't even really get hard for me until I'm at like 1600 ELO, or so. That's when the computer starts pitting you against, other players who are on average a lot stronger. Um, so for me, um, usually when I look at my win to loss ratio when I start a new account, I have something like 50. By the time I'm like close to the top of the ladder, I'm at something like 50 wins and like 5 losses. Um, so I win like almost every game essentially. And then of course when it's a bit more of a crapshoot because you're facing stronger opponents. Once you're past 1600, and then at that point I might win the next. I probably have to win like 20 or 30 more games to get to the rank 1 position. And then maybe out of those I lose maybe like a third of those games at that point. So maybe I would like lose 10 games and win like 20 or 30 games, and then I would be rank 1. So I don't know what he's talking about when he says 30 ELO. Okay, so you're going from like 1000 or like 1100, you get 30 ELO, so you beat a few people based on luck, and then you get slightly higher on the ladder. You're still only like 5% of the way to the top of the ladder. Because like I said, like even if you're like the best player, like if you're starting from scratch, it's going to take you like, and you're winning, and even if you're winning like every single game almost, then it's still going to take you a good 60, 70 games to get to the rank 1 position on the ladder, to the top of the ladder, as he's saying. So obviously you aren't going to get that much of a better team than your opponent in all 70 games, like in a row or whatever. And the fights are only going to get super hard for you, like if you are, unless if you're extremely skilled, you have all the skills to back up your rank on the ladder, you're just gonna get pretty much thrashed, once you're over 50%, of the way to the top of the ladder. Like you can be like almost never having played Pokemon before and just, playing a lot, getting really lucky and maybe get like halfway to the top of the ladder. But then, and that's maybe, after like many hours, like maybe a full day of playing. But then you're not gonna get like you're not just going to get super lucky on the next like 50 games that you have to win like in a row against the very best players who on average have like an 80 100%, 90% chance of beating you every single game just because they have the skills and the knowledge to back up each battle, each no matter who the opponent is they're facing. Um, so the other thing I would have to say about this is that who really cares about climbing to the top of the ladder? I mean, like, what's the actual point? Because, like I said, like, unless if you actually have the skills to back up, your climb, you could even get rank one on the ladder, but you won't stay there. You won't be able to stay there long at all. Like, even if you, like, for one, if you just stop playing, your account will naturally decay because you lose points if you don't play games. So you won't be, like, even in the top 10 for very long, um, if you just stop playing. You're just going to keep falling and falling. Eventually, you just go back down to the bottom of the ladder. So you have to continuously be defeating, the strongest opponents if you want to stay at the top of the ladder. Basically, you could probably stop playing for a couple days, maybe even a few days, but then after that, you aren't even in top 10 anymore. Then you fall out of top 20, top 50. Um, so to be like recognized as a player who is consistently at the top of the ladder, there's no way that you can be lucky. You have to be basically really skilled. You have to have probably at least like an 80 GXE, or preferably closer to 90 GXE, which means like on average you're beating 80. You can beat the average player like 80% or 90% of the time, right? And it doesn't matter if your team is worse than theirs or better than theirs, you're still going to beat them like 80 to 90% of the time, on average. So then, yeah, so he's saying, so I don't know what he's talking about. So you win a few games, and then he's saying you get to the top of the ladder. Like, I don't think there's like any real argument for that. I kind of think he's just making that up. Well, I mean, he's like accidentally making it up, but I mean, this argument holds no weight, is just what I'm saying. And yeah, just because you so happen to get six stations. Well, that's the other thing, is that they do level balancing in Gen 8 random battles, so it may not even matter if you get six stations or six of any mon, because you can easily get beaten by, because they're going to be lower level, right? And you could easily just get beaten by like Heatran. Like, what if your Zacians are just like Swords Dance, Psychic Fangs, Play Rough, um, and then they they can be a set without close combat, right? But just, yeah, whatever. For example, they don't have close combat. They're just whatever set they are, just without that move. Um, I'm just trying to give a quick example, right? Like, your opponent could just have a mon that just beats all of them. Plus, you can't even Dynamax if you have six stations. So I think you're actually at a big disadvantage if you have six stations against almost any team, because you can't even Dynamax. Because your opponent could just Dynamax, Dyna Flying one of their mons, and then just after one Dyna Flying, they're going to be faster than all six Zacians, and then they're just going to maybe be able to beat them all. Like, think Ho-Oh, Dyna Flying. And is Zacian the Steel Fairy? I mean, it doesn't matter. Like, either one. If it's the Steel Fairy one, yeah, it would be Ho-Oh, Dyna Flying, and then Dyna Fire, and then it just automatically sweeps all six Zacians. And that's just one mon that would beat all six of them. Or if it's the Pure Fairy one, then you could just think of something like a Melmetal. Melmetal, just turn one, Dyna Steel, or turn three, or whenever you want to bring it in, right? You can just like beat all of them, and then if they don't have close combat or whatever, um, it. So that's kind of why I personally don't know what my opinion is on species clause. Like, I don't really know how important it is. I don't know why he's claiming it's extremely important. And then the next thing he says is sleep clause. As I said, just helps you from not getting swept by some dude, the janitor, who just thought he could sweep up your whole team with Spore Leech Seed. Yeah, just pack them up. Just quit at that point. Your opponent just has Spore and Leech Seed on one of their mons. Yeah, but no, that can. I sort of agree with that one though, and I do think I agree with Sleep Clause being a thing. Maybe you could debate like if you could put up to two mons to sleep, but I think not. I think sleep is so broken that I agree with it being limited. I don't know if it's limited outside of random battles, but in random battles, sleep is for sure super broken. And then he's saying those are the core rules. I don't know why he capitalizes rules of Randbats. Now let's get to the randomization. I think he should have capitalized randomization. In Randbats, you are given 6 Pokemon that are randomized to an extent. True. They are only to an extent. Yes, not all of it is random. Only certain Pokemon can go into Randbats, and most Pokemon that are just overall horrible Pokemon won't be in Randbats. For example, Charmander. I mean, that example doesn't make any sense because it's only fully evolved Pokemon that are in Randbats, unless if it's an Eviolite Mon, right? Unless if it actually has a reason to be there due to like an item. In fact, that's probably the only reason that I can think of, like a Chansey with Eviolite. I can't think of any other unevolved Mon. Like, I mean, you have Girder, but again, Eviolite. Can't think of any other Mon that, like, the only reason would be Eviolite. Can't think of another item. That would be, and definitely you don't have any, like, third stage under evolution Mons like a Charmander. Okay, so he's talking all this dialogue. I don't know why. I don't know why he even brings all this up. I think he just brings it up and then doesn't mention if this is a good or bad or anything. So he says the whole point of Randbats is that you don't know what the other person has on their team. I mean, that's not the whole point. That's like maybe 1 out of 100 points for why I love Randbats and for why Randbats is so fun and interesting and skillful of a format to play in. Um, but sure, you don't know what the other person has on the team. In fact, that's kind of what that kind of adds a pretty fun element because you don't have to think for an hour on turn one of exactly how you're going to play the game. I mean, you still do kind of if you're a really good player in Randbats, but you don't necessarily have to. Um, like if you saw their whole team, then for sure you would play the entire game completely differently. So that is definitely one aspect of Randbats in that you don't know their team. However, there are way too many ways to figure this out, he says. There are way too many ways to figure. Not really. To be honest, not really. In fact, it takes an incredible amount of skill to sort of predict what your opponent still has on their team. And you're never going to be 100% correct in guessing what they even have. You're probably not even going to be 70% or 50% correct in guessing what they have left on their team. Because in fact, a really good player will bait you into thinking that they have certain mons left on their team that they don't have. So that's one of the most advanced techniques that you can use in random battles is sort of just the bluffing or the like basically making an illusion of what you would have or what your opponent would think you would have. Like your opponent, I've seen often, a really good player will keep bluffing that they don't have a ground type to switch into Regieleki, so they keep switching in all of these other mons, and then in the end game, you think that your Regieleki can just come in and just easily win the game because they don't have a ground type mon or like a lightning rod mon, because they haven't been switching in a ground type the entire game, and then they reveal their last mon is Mamoswine. So I've seen that play before where Mamoswine went on to just be the last mon against Freezeye, the really popular YouTuber. It was one of the last games in his Gen 8 random battle Sword and Shield series, where they just were keeping that Mamo hidden the entire time, and then it just like beat Zygarde, it beat whatever his remaining mons were. might have even ice sharded a Salazzle or whatever, and then beat Regieleki. So that's something that's a really advanced part of random battles, and part of why it's a skillful format is the, you know, thing that you can have your team hidden, and in fact there aren't many ways to figure this out, and there is no way. This guy's kind of making me a bit angry, because it's like he's trying to get rid of like the best format there is, essentially, by making all of these claims that there are 100 counter arguments, stronger arguments against. um, in fact, I think it's good that you can sort of have some ways to kind of figure out what your opponent has in the back, because that makes it even more of a skillful game, in that it's not just completely random. Um, in that, you could maybe even start figuring out, maybe there's a 10-20% chance that they have some certain things in the back. So that's what makes it even more fun and interesting, because then you can sort of make plays around that. And yet it's not like busted. You can sort of make a play, but it's not like for sure what they have in the back. So then he says there is a whole formula on what item you will get in rand bats. If you have, I like how he capitalizes formula. I mean, this is a perfect thing, because the more skillful player will have more to work with, more to go off for navigating how to win the game. If you have 2 or fewer attacks, you will always get a leftovers/black sludge. Pokemon with 3 attacks get Life Orb if the sum of their base HP, defense, and special defense is all under 275. If not, they get leftovers/black sludge. So I'd have to think about all this. I think this is from. I think you can actually look up on Google just what all of these things are that he's saying. Like, this information is out there for Gen 8 random battles. I definitely have to make a video about that in the future. But he's probably pretty much just copy pasting from there, so I'll just believe him. That sounds about right. If you have 2 or fewer attacks, you will always get leftovers/black sludge. If you have 2 or fewer attacks. So that's interesting to me. So that's making me think of Aegislash, because that's actually something I'm thinking of right now, is how to determine if Aegislash, not Aegislash Blade, but Aegislash, like what items it will have, because there's one set I believe that would always be the Leftovers Shadow Ball Substitute King Shield Toxic set. But then there's the other Leftovers set, which is less likely, which can, I believe, be a mix of, correct me if I'm wrong, this is just precisely what I'm trying to figure out from what he's saying right here, because I don't want to play 100 games, 1,000 games to figure out, to eventually figure out this Aegislash set. So maybe if you can leave a comment in the comment section if you're listening at this point in the video. This is maybe one of the main things I'm trying to figure out of the hundreds of mons and hundreds of things that I'm trying to figure out about this. This is probably the most complicated one of them, is the Aegislash set, because only like 15% of the time, if it's Aegislash, not Aegislash Blade, if it has leftovers, I'm wondering exactly what the set will be, because obviously there's the one set that will be Shadow Ball, King Shield, Sub, Toxic, Leftovers, but then there's another set that can have, is it King Shield, Shadow Ball, Sub, Toxic, Leftovers, with Shadow Ball, with Shadow Sneak, if my memory serves, and with, it's in the code, it's in the list with all of the mons in it and all of the movesets. And then because there's the Life Orb and the Band, but that's the Aegislash Blade. I'm talking about the other Aegislash that's Leftovers. So will that Leftovers set not be sub-toxic, right? Not, because I know there's like one set that's always the sub-toxic King Shield Shadow Ball. But then the other Leftovers set, will that be never sub-toxic? Will that be never sub-toxic? That's my question. Or can it have sub-toxic? Or will it always be a mix of King Shield, Shadow Ball, Shadow Sneak, Flash Cannon, and I don't believe Close Combat Iron Head are in that set, but they could be. Just going off memory. So that is my big question that I have. That's probably one of the only pieces of information that is incomplete that I'm unable to figure out of the entire. Like I can figure out what every single ability of every mon does, what every single move set. Well, not every move set. I can figure out all interactions. Like hail damage, like um, how like Dynamax move powers and effect. I can figure out everything, all possible information on Gen 8, except this is maybe one of the extremely difficult things to figure out is certain sets of mons, right? Because even the list that tells you every single set is incomplete in telling you every single set. Basically, you have to like physically play the games, like load up the games to get the information exactly correct. Like I was saying, like the code tells you that there's a set with like leftovers, shadow balls, flash cannon, shadow sneak. Except it doesn't tell you that there is a set that's like 100% of the time, like almost all, like 100% of the time, the sub toxic King's Shield Shadow Ball set. Um, so it's just like incomplete at telling you that. So that's what I'm trying to figure out. Anyway, continuing. Pokemon with 3 attacks get Life Orb if the sum of their base HP, defense, and special defense is under 275. Does that sound correct? So basically, they're kind of just like glass cannons at that point. Pokemon with 3 attacks will get Life Orb. So that makes me think of Azelf, right? Like a Nasty Plot, Fire Blast, Gleam, Psyshock set versus a non-Life Orb set, I suppose would be like a Leftovers Azelf with, then he's saying it would be, so like 3 attacks would be like, it would have to be less than 3, so it would be like Taunt Rocks, I suppose. Be like Taunt Rocks and then like a combination of like U-Turn, Fire Blast, Psyshock, Gleam. I think it always gets Psyshock, so then it would just be Psyshock. So does that mean it would have to be Psyshock? And then I think it's only like, it only gets like 2 moves, right? That are like like attacks. Like, doesn't it only get like Rocks and Taunt, I believe? Like it doesn't get anything else. I don't believe. Oh, I think it can get Nasty Plot, but can the Leftovers Azelf even get Nasty Plot? Or would it just always be, non-Nasty Plot? And then, so those would be the only 3 possible moves on it, I believe. Nasty Plot, Taunt, and Stealth Rock. So does that mean Leftovers would always be Rocks and Taunt? And Psyshock, of course, because that's on all sets. Or I believe Psyshock's on all sets. Don't tell me it can be Psychic. I don't believe it can be Psychic. I think it is always Psyshock. So yeah, I think that's sort of probably correct, like what he's saying. And then he's saying if not, they get they get Leftovers / Black Sludge. Pokemon with 4 matching attacks will get a choice item. Yeah, for sure. Although, are there mons that would have 4 matching attacks that don't have a choice item? Maybe not actually. Maybe not. I would definitely have to think of that one. I wonder, does Heatmore always get sub on it? Maybe that could be like one thing. Could it be just like, I believe it always gets Fire Lash and Giga Drain, but then could it just be like Knock? I believe it also can't be Knock and Sucker Punch, so it could be either Knock or Sucker, and then it can be superpower as the last move. So maybe it could have 4 moves, I believe then in that case, or does it always get sub on the set? I'm just trying to think of maybe just one example as a counter example for this. But anyway, usually it's like really easy to determine when your opponent has a choice item or not. Obviously, you see it just if they don't have any other item, like if they don't reveal leftovers usually or life orb, then usually it kind of tells you that they're choiced. And you also have the damage calculator. If they outspeed you, then you know they're scarf. And based on how much damage they do, you know if they're scarf or banned. So that's kind of just the easy way of telling. Anyway, so this probably is one of the less useful things to know. Is just the 4 matching attacks is the choice item. Um, I mean that's kind of intuitive though. Anyway, and I would be lying. He's saying if I said that calculations are easy. Pokemon with 4 physical attacks or 4 special attacks, a base speed between 60 and 108, and a base attack or spatak of 100 or more can get a scarf 2/3 of the time. If they don't meet one of the stat qualifications or don't get the 2 out of 3 chance, they'll get a specs or a band instead. That sounds about right, and I think even sort of just copy pasting, and so he's saying what I'm about to say. He's saying this is why Choice Scarf Dracozolt exists in random battles, but Scarf Dracovish doesn't. Right. So Pokemon with 3 special attacks and U-turn will always get specs. Huh. Special attacks, eh? So that would be like Azelf with like U-turn and then the specs. Pokemon with moves that can swap items will always get a choice item, right? So you could think of like Behem or Switcheroo, Manectric, choice item, and if they meet the 60 to 108 speed range, they will get a scarf. Otherwise, it's specs/band. Having any priority moves makes you not able to get a choice scarf. Right. So you won't see like Scarf Bullet Punch or anything. Pokemon with 4 attacks that don't qualify for choice items, like rapid spin users. Oh, by the way, I was kind of lazy what I said there. Having any priority moves makes you not able to have a scarf. Obviously, scarf Scizor doesn't exist. So what would be like Scarfmon that could potentially have a priority move but does not? Yeah, I'm thinking of like Manectric, no. Scizor, well, so Scarfmons. So that'd be like Dracozolt, no. Gudra, no. Other Scarfmons. I don't know. You could probably think of it too off the top of your head. Mr. Mime, no. Are there even any Scarfmons that would otherwise actually even like have priority on them? I mean, Durant would only be banned with like first impression. You would have like banded first impression mons. Maybe I should just think about it like by the move. So if we're thinking like E-speed, would there be any Scarfmon that could potentially even have like an E-speed? Don't believe so. And then what about like a quick attack? Quick attack, just like Terrakion, but no. What else even can get like the quick attack? So like a Diggersby. Oh, so that's like the example. I finally thought of an example. Maybe one of the only examples. So yeah, Diggersby. There is a Scarf Diggersby, I know, and Diggersby can get quick attack, but you would never see quick attack on a Scarf Diggersby. So there we go. We finally got there. And then he's saying Pokemon with 4 attacks don't qualify for choice items. like rapid spin users, right? So you wouldn't ever see like choice rapid spin. And mixed attackers, although I think I might have seen. Have I seen like Scarf Defog Flygun? I feel like I might have. Hmm. But then he's saying. Was he saying it would just be always 4 attacks on a Scarf set? Hmm. I'd have to. Maybe I'm not remembering correctly if I actually saw Scarf Defog before. Maybe I didn't. And then he's saying, like, rapid spin users and mixed attackers. Right. Mixed attackers. Yeah, that's an interesting point. You won't see a mixed attacking choicer. Wait, what about Gudra? So does that mean Gudra, Scarf Gudra will always be... Well, I think maybe it always has to have Draco Meteor, so does that mean it'll always just be special attacks on a Scarf Gudra? That's actually extremely important to know, because then you just know that it doesn't have Power Weapon, doesn't have Earthquake on it. Um, so then they'll get an Assault Vest, an AV, if their HP plus defense plus SPDF is greater than or equal to 235. If they don't meet the bulk minimum, Pokemon with 4 attacks will get E-Belt, Lefties, or Orb, instead depending on their exact moves. Mons that are weak to rock will get heavy duty boots if they don't get a higher priority item, such as an assault vest or choice item. Um, so it'd be like Volcarona would get the heavy duty boots, but then again that's a 4x week, so maybe not the best example. But yeah, I think you would always see that on the Volk. You wouldn't ever, of course, see AV or choice. Um, weak to rock, so that's like every fire type in the game. So like you could think of an arc. An arc will usually always get the heavy duty boots, but they can have a higher priority item. I've seen like banded, choice banded arc as well. Not AV though. I don't think. Yeah, it can't get AV, but it can get like band or boots, or that might be it for arc, right? Maybe leftovers, although I'm not sure about that. If it is leftovers, it's probably like less than a 5% roll on that. And then he's saying Pokemon that are 4x weak to rock, such as Char and Frost, will always get heavy duty boots. The only exception is Scyther. Is that correct? Yeah, that's probably correct. Which can get the Eviolite. Mons in the lead slot will get a Focus Sash if they're HP. No, no, no. I don't think this is correct. Pokemon. This is maybe one of the only things he's said before that probably isn't correct. Although, of course, I'd have to look at every single Mon to see if everything he said before was correct. I assume he's just copy pasting this from some other thing, of course, that probably had the facts correct. Anyway, what he is saying is Pokemon in the lead slot will get Focus Sash if their HP plus defense plus SPDF is less than 255. Wait, is that correct? They will get Focus Sash. If they're... I don't know if that's correct. I think it's a roll, something like a 50% chance to get a Focus Sash if you're in the lead slot. And you can get Focus Sash. So both things on the Venn diagram, lead slot, and if you can get Focus Sash, then I think it's something like a 50% chance that you will have the Focus Sash. Something like 50. I'm giving you a rough number. Might be 25. Might be 75. And they would otherwise get Life Orb or Lefties, he says. Pokemon... Yeah, I don't know if that's correct. They would otherwise get Life Orb or Lefties? I don't think there's any. Um, yeah, I don't think you ever know for sure if the lead mon has a sash or not until you actually can determine that by attacking them or whatnot. Because I think again it's something like a 25 to 75% chance that if they can have a sash and they are a lead that they will have a sash. I think it might be closer to 50%. Um, so yeah, I don't know if I would quite believe that line unless if I really extensively test that myself. And then he's saying Pokemon that get a speed boosting move will be given a weakness policy if their HP plus defense plus def is greater than or equal to 300 and they aren't 4x weak to ground. Wait, what do you mean a speed boosting move? But isn't there a Crustle um with like boots instead of weakness policy? Well, I'd have to add up its HP and defense and SpDef to see like if the statement is correct or not. But I don't know. I don't know. You guys can do the math on that. I'm just thinking, there's Crustle with like it has sturdy for a reason. Well, no. What am I saying? Crustle can't have the weakness policy, so Caracosta would be the other one I would be thinking of. So Caracosta seems pretty bulky. Um, so there is like weakness policy Caracosta, and then there's White Herb Caracosta. So it's not 4x weak to ground. It seems pretty bulky. Like it's maybe over greater than or equal to 300 HP plus def plus SpDef. So I don't know if that statement is exactly correct that he's saying there. And then he's saying, you now know how you get items in this game. Now let's get into the horrible parts of this meta game. You thought that, number one, you thought that, I like how he says number one and then he doesn't give a number two or anything. You thought that, ignoring the calcs, the game is fully random and you don't know what the other Pokemon might have, right? Ignoring the galaxy, you don't know what the other two. Yeah, I mean, you kind of really don't know. In fact, I definitely agree. In fact, I basically just disagree with him. You you only have a 50% chance of ever knowing like what their exact set is, or probably even less than that. Just I'm talking on average. So he's saying there are two things you can say in the Pokemon Showdown chat to find out what moves, and if you are smart enough, what items they will be holding. So I don't know exactly how much I'd recommend that myself, because then your opponent kind of knows, that you don't know what you're doing. Maybe they can kind of gauge what level of player you are, and maybe they can make plays and predictions around that. If you want to type that into chat, they're like, because like I mean, I don't know why you would even type that into chat. It kind of tells your opponent that you don't have important tools to win the game, like the Pokemon Extension Tooltip that just tells you automatically all the potential moves that your opponent can get. It kind of reveals to your opponent that maybe you aren't that good at calcing stuff in general. So maybe your opponent can take advantage of that and maybe stay in. Like if your opponent does a clever calc, they know that they can like beat you because they know that they are running calcs that you aren't, so they can take advantage of you not knowing how much certain things will do, how much damage and whatnot. So I wouldn't really. There's no reason to type anything into chat to learn anything because there are tools and extensions that tell you that stuff faster, and then you can even open up damage calc, like, and then that's faster. Or calc dex would also be faster. Then you never want to like waste time typing that into chat because I mean, heck, it probably takes you a good 15 seconds just to type in the exact mon's name like correctly, you know and then it gives you only a little bit of information about the mon. It's really not the way to go at all. Um, and he's saying if you are smart enough. No, it's actually the opposite. You're not very smart if you type it into chat because again, it's just taking up more time, and you're going to run out your timer faster than if you already had the built-in tools at your disposal to give you this information a lot faster. So And then it'll tell you what items they will be holding, he says. Using /ranbats and then the Pokemon name, you get a full list of any moves they can be using. Okay, I mean, that's probably correct. I don't know because I don't really use that. And then he's saying there are also certain websites that are made to show you the list of moves and items a Pokemon can be holding. If you are just that lazy, I mean, that's the opposite of lazy. It takes extreme. That's the extreme opposite of lazy because if you go look up the moves, then you basically have to spend hundreds of hours memorizing all of these sets, the hundreds of sets, and all the different moves and all of the percentages that they'll get those moves. So that is the extreme opposite of lazy. You're lazy if you don't do that. So, yeah, this is correct though, and I am making a video. I don't know if it's coming out before or after this video, but yeah, there are websites that tell you most of these things. They don't tell you the exact things you want to know, which is why you actually have to, again, be the opposite of lazy and write out every single set for the hundreds of mons. Because they don't tell you like every 10 set that a mon can have, like all 10 sets or whatever. Like they only give you like the percentages of certain moves, so you still don't even know. So that's another point against him, against his argument. I mean, I don't really care about attacking this guy. I'm just attacking his argument. Um, you know, don't shoot the messenger, shoot the message, right? So, where was I? In reading his whatever. So, if I did /ranbats, oh no. Yeah, you get a full list of any moves they can be using. Okay, so it basically makes it so it's more skillful of a game. They can't just have some random BS, right? They can't just have some random BS set that just completely hacks you out and that is totally unexpected. So then he's saying there are also certain websites that are made to show you the list. Yeah, I read that. Of moves and items a Pokemon can be holding. Correct, if you're just that lazy. For example, if I did /ranbats towards a Pokemon that had leftovers that already used one of its moves, I could find out most of its moveset just from the get-go. Well, yeah, and that takes an extreme amount of skill at the same time because you're going to run out of timer if you don't know how to do that. Like you basically have to already have memorized the moveset, the 5, 6 possible moves that they could have, because you're just not going to have any time to go. Like even if you have that list on that other website pulled up right there, or you type in the Pokemon name, it's still going to take you a solid 20, 30 seconds to figure that out. You only have like 100 seconds or whatever on the timer, and that's cumulative. Like every turn, your timer basically gets shorter and shorter. So you're just going to run out of time if you're looking up any of this, basically. So that's why it's more skillful. That's why it's extremely skillful gameplay, basically, because you have to already have like these hundreds of things memorized, these hundreds of sets. Um, so he's saying, yeah, you could find out most of its moveset, sure, but that doesn't tell you what its moveset is. In fact, that might completely fool you because you know what really good players do is they actually hide. They actually like to bluff movesets. What their moveset could be, and they like to save unique movesets. Like if they have a weird moveset, they'll actually save that mon like in the back, and then you think it's going to be a certain moveset, but it's actually the moveset that there's only a 10% chance that your opponent could possibly have. So you're going to be completely thrown off if you actually try to look up like what you think their set is, because then they'll just be a choice band set and just OHKO your mon out of nowhere if you think that they're just like leftovers and they aren't going to be hitting you very hard. So then he says, if you thought that was broken, no, I think it's the complete opposite of broken. I think it's more broken if there is whatever he's wanting it to be rather than what it is. So he's saying there is another built-in damage calculator just for Ranbats. Yeah, that's perfect because then you can make really skillful plays That's why it's a more skillful gameplay, because there is a damage calculator. So the only thing truly random of this metagame is the Pokemon you get. Well, not really, because like I said, the moves and the move sets are also random to a degree. Like even if they're leftovers, you don't know like exactly which combination of moves they will have, even if they do use that one move, like he was saying in his example. In fact, it's not even a bad thing that both you and your opponent know that your specs are banned or whatever, because then you can just bluff and make like really good plays from that shared knowledge, right? Because you could just intentionally lock yourself into a move with ban just to fool your opponent into sending out a mon that comes in on your band, but then you just Dynamax and break out of your band and Oko them out of nowhere. So you can pull off tricks and surprises against your opponent, even if you're locked into Scarf or Band. In fact, that's one thing that for why Gen 8 is, I think, one of the most skillful genres of all time for Pokemon, is that you're basically never at a disadvantage no matter what the situation. You can always think of some clever way to get out of any situation that you find yourself in, because like you and your opponent will both know that you're a band, but then you can have like multiple routes from there. You can make a double from that position and then beat your opponent. B, you can like even if like you have a Doug Trio against their Ho, like against their Mon, like your Doug Trio locks itself into Earthquake. They send in Ho-Oh. Then you have multiple options. So usually you would be at a big disadvantage because you can't Dynamax. You're locked into Earthquake, and then they just get off a free hit on you with their Ho-Oh. Or I could probably think of even a better example, like maybe some type of setup mon. Like let's say they have like a Frostmoth, like Quiver Dance Frostmoth, that after one Quiver Dance will just beat your entire team, right? But you could break out of your Earthquake and go for the Max Rockfall and just Oko the Frostmoth. So it's actually incredibly skillful gameplay at that point, because you actually have like three options that, so you're at a tremendous disadvantage, right? Because they just click Quiver Dance and win the game, but then you have three options to completely flip the game on your opponent. For one, you can just Dynamax and Max Rockfall. For two, you can predict your opponent to predict your Dynamax Rockfall and you can just double out of there. For three, you can predict your opponent to predict your Dynamax Rockfall or your double, and then you could just Earthquake again. And so you see there are like many different options that you can go for. So you're basically like never at a disadvantage. No matter what the situation, there's always like a skillful, clever way that you can sort of get out of most situations that you don't have in other gens where you can't Dynamax. And in fact, it's even more like interesting in random battles because it's like for sure that you're a certain set. Like, so then you basically, it's like more of a mind. It's like not even like, I don't even want to say mind game. It's like more skillful at that point, because you can't just pull out some random BS by being like some like a soft sand set, like soft sand versus band. Like you can sort of bluff a band if you're like soft sand or whatever, but that item wouldn't exist in Ranbats. So basically it's only certain things that, so within the limitation is infinity, I guess, is the motto to go for. Within limitation is infinite possibility, is I guess my motto. So then if you thought that was broken, there is another built-in damage calculator, blah, blah, blah. So he's saying, I think I lost my place. So he's here. We were here, I believe. So the only truly random thing of the metagame is the mons you get. No. But then he says everything else is not random. Well, they are to a degree. And even if they aren't exactly, I mean, I argue that it doesn't matter that much. So he's saying your moves, question mark, not random. Your items, not random. Nothing in this metagame is truly random. Hell, just knowing this information, I was able to get to 1300 ELO in a day. So that seems like really low. And if this was back in the day, that was when they were like 2500 was like the top of the ladder. And I mean, even if he's going by today's standards, that's like pretty low. I'm not trying to say like he's a bad player or whatever. I'm just saying like that's really low. It seems like a very strange brag. 1300 ELO. That's like you could get to that in like 1 hour. I mean, I'm not joking at all. I mean, maybe not an hour, maybe like 2 hours, but like he's saying he can get to 1300 ELO in a day. I really don't know what his argument is. Just being able to calculate damage, think ahead for crits. I mean, to be honest, I wouldn't play around crits at all. You're just gonna throw the game at that point if you're worried about getting crit, which is only like a 4% chance. That's my experience just as like one of the best players in Ranbat's Gen 8 is you rarely want to play around crits. Unless if you're going to be taking many hits, then you have to start thinking about getting crit. But if you're only taking 1 or 2 hits, then the odds are like higher that you're going to like miss your hydro pump or your fire blast. The odds are higher for that than getting a crit in 1 or 2 turns, right? Odds of missing fire blast 15%, odds of getting crit 4%. And so he's saying, and knowing their movesets was enough. I currently stand at 1357 ELO just from knowing this information. I mean, this is a very strange brag again. I mean, that's actually kind of like I would still say bottom of the ladder, like very you're like I don't even know if that's mid ladder. I wouldn't call that mid ladder. I would say mid ladder is more like 1500 ELO, or back in the day when 2500 was the top of the ladder, mid ladder is more like 1800 ELO. So this just shows how broken this is. My gosh, I can't really stand this guy. It's not broken at all. I mean, so and yes, I know at the end of the day, you don't need to know just this to play Ranbats. You need to know how to switch effectively, correct? How to use switch type moves, flip turn, U-turn, etc., etc. I mean, yeah, knowing how to use moves is good. I mean, I don't know why he mentions these moves. You need to know how to use every move in the game. But he says, with the understanding of knowing the other person's team, held item, and nature is overall broken. I mean, you don't really know their team at all. You don't really know their item most or like half of the time. And sure, you know their nature, but I mean, none of this is broken. It allows for interesting and skillful gameplay. And then he says, all that you need to know is their team, and from 1000 ELO to 1200 ELO, you can just play with your brain cells off and get to the top 1200 ladder. I mean, what's he even talking about? Like, who cares about who gets even to like rank 1 on the ladder? I mean, it doesn't, none of that even matters. And he's saying top 1200, that's like not even mid ladder. That's like low ladder. That's like really low ladder. I mean, maybe he was playing at, I don't know, maybe he's using the wrong numbers. Either way, my argument still stands. I mean, who cares like who's at where on the ladder, really? I mean, what matters is just how fun and interesting the game is, and how how much it offers for skillful gameplay, right? And ideally how well it rewards the better player, which it does. The better player has a really high statistic win ratio on average. So the game is perfect as is, essentially. But this guy does not seem to understand that. So he says, if you play with everything in mind, you can get to 1500 ladder. I mean, who really cares at all? I mean, in fact, that's a good thing that, if you are playing, if you are like a smart person, you're making good plays, you can get, maybe to mid ladder. I mean, that seems perfectly fine to me. TLDR, I hate random battles. Play whatever this is instead. So, yeah, I don't really understand or agree with anything that he says there. I mean, the other funny thing is he gives these extremely long paragraphs, and he doesn't really. Well, I guess that's is part of his argument that nothing is really random. Okay, so I guess he sort of ties it in a little bit. So then we have some comments here. Yes, however, what if I just can't be bothered to make a team? Yeah, so that's I think one big appeal of Ranbats is that it's like pretty quick and that you don't really have to bother making any of your teams at all. That's one thing we all love about Ranbats. And it's in fact like quite fair due to that in that it's only like a 50% chance that your opponent's team likely isn't that much better than your team, no matter what. And half the time you'll have the better team, half the time you won't. So it's pretty fair and balanced. So the next comment, you play any other randomized metagame, which there are many of. Try Gen 1 to 4. The randomizing is more seen there. I haven't played Gen 1 to 4 myself, so I can't really comment on that. It sounds worse though if it's like what this guy is sort of wanting, because he's saying it's like even more like random. Like I think what he means by random is that it's not well thought out. It's just complete like utter chaos. Like literally you can get anything. You can get like literally any mon. You can get literally any like ability, any item. Essentially, like you could get a team of like 6 completely broken mons. Your opponent could get a team of like 6 unevolved, really bad mons with no useful item, and then it's just complete. In fact, that's where you're playing with no brain cells at all, sort of. At that point, because you just have the better team, that just basically wins. In fact, I'm playing with all my brain cells completely turned on. Usually, I almost run out of time on the timer in like every single game that I play because that's how much skill it takes to play random battles. Because you do have to think, like while you're running down the time on the timer, you have to think of what potential moves they could have. You're doing calcs to determine what set they have. So it's actually a very complex gameplay. So the next thing is blah blah blah. He can clown on me all he wants. I'm still better than him. Blah blah blah. Just some D measuring contest. Random battles in Showdown are fun to just brainlessly hop into sometimes without heavily thinking of a team and strategy, says AV Dragon. Yeah. So random bats is fun, I agree. This person, atheistic, a forum expert, is saying, I mean, isn't that like a good thing though? Wouldn't you want the only random factors to be your team? After all, if a Pokemon like Mew could have any moveset, it would probably be broken. It gets a billion moves. So yeah, I think that's kind of a fair counter argument to this guy. I mean, I think I'll take any argument that's against this guy at this point. So then he says, also, blah 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 is worse. I don't know what AG is. Some other Pokemon Showdown format. No sleep clause and no species clause means someone can rock 3 Amoonguses and click Spore and then go to their first or second SD-zations, depending on your team coverage, and win the game. Yeah, so again, this is why Ranbat's Gen 8 Random Battles is so good, because we do have these clauses in effect. So then he's saying, I personally like RU, the mons aren't crazy strong, and the tier is pretty fun. Yeah, that's an interesting point. I guess that is maybe one thing about Ranbats I never really thought of, is that what if like mons just couldn't do that much damage in general? Then I guess you would have to get creative with how you beat your opponent, right? Like you would get a lot more mileage out of like T-spikes and hazards and then like leech seed leftovers and pressure stall strategies, right? Because then those would be more of the main win con rather than just hitting really hard, just punching really hard, just oonga boonga, Bunke style combat, where you're basically just clicking the strong, super effective move. I see super effective, I click. So yeah, I could actually see that as being a bit of a good argument. Because, for example, like that's one thing I really love to roll is just mons that can get fast, get strong, and then hit super hard. I think those are some of the best win cons in Gen 8 random battles, right? Like your Shell Smash, like Shift Gear, Dragon Dance, Geomancy mons. Just one turn, get super fast and strong, and then punch your opponent really hard in the face. Um, those end up usually being like good win cons at any point in the game, even just early game. If you want to break through your opponent's team, just break mons in general. Just break the team in general, put them on less mons. So yeah, maybe Gen 8 could be arguably a bit more skillful, but then you'd have to like completely change the gen, I feel, right? Because I feel like that's kind of like the whole thing with Dynamax is that, you get really strong basically because the moves hit super hard. They hit like a truck essentially. So you'd have to change way too much at this point, in Gen 8 random battles if you want to sort of just nerf every mon, right? Just make like all Dynamax moves, like only like 90 base power, basically like as strong or weaker than just normal moves at that point. You'd have to like completely nerf Gen 8, you'd have to like change way too much. So I don't think they should do any of that at this point. Basically, the format should just stay as is with maybe only minor edits. So then this guy, Snake again, I mean, that's kind of a fitting name for this guy, although I gotta admit, that's a pretty cool avatar. So he says, hope you know the other person had these factors in mind, and no, I want full randomness, so just go play Hackmons or Challenge Cup. I really don't know why he wrote this article in the first place. So I think that is about it. Yeah, so this guy is saying, personally, I like the more metered randomness, but it's a matter of opinion. Yeah, that's exactly it. It's metered. It's very well calculated. They did it through trial and error to get Gen 8 Ranbats to the point where it is today. They tweaked the move sets time and time again to get it like 99% to perfection. So they need to just keep the format the way it is. And I think that's like all the comments here.